She said, "It was just an accident, but there are no accidents. You will be shocked to hear what happened next." There was something about the smell that didn't belong. Not bad, actually the opposite. Expensive, sharp, floral, and clean like cut glass. It hit me the moment she walked in, lingering faintly in the folds of her yoga mat bag as she tossed it onto the chair. She moved past me toward the kitchen like nothing had changed, like the air wasn't tainted by something I'd never once smelled in our home before. My wife, Julia, wore the same 3 scents, always had. This wasn't one of them. I didn't say a thing. I nodded when she asked if dinner was ready and chewed through the awkward silence like it was just another Thursday night. But inside, something snapped. A signal. A quiet alarm in my gut that refused to be ignored. The kind that whispers when something's about to go terribly, irrevocably wrong. It started small, watching her routine with a different lens. Every Thursday was yoga night. She'd leave in those tight leggings and come back red-faced and flushed, like she'd just crushed an hour on the mat. But now every detail seemed performative. The sweat, the bottled water half empty in her cup holder. Even the Spotify yoga playlist left on pause on her phone felt like it was for my benefit. A decoy. So the next Thursday I followed. Not closely, I wasn't stupid. I waited a few blocks before tailing her, careful not to get too close. She never made it to the yoga studio. Instead, she took a hard left at the traffic light and headed downtown, to that district full of luxury boutiques and overpriced wine bars. I parked across the street and watched her pull into a valet. My pulse jackhammered in my throat. I saw him before she did. He was already waiting, leaning against the stone arch of a designer storefront. Tailored suit, easily $5,000. Watch that probably cost more than my first car. The bastard smiled when he saw her, stepped forward and kissed her cheek like it was routine. Familiar. She laughed. I couldn't hear it, but I saw her head tilt back, her hands settle on his chest for balance. I snapped a photo from the dashboard. Later that night, I ran the picture through image search tools, linked it to a law firm's press release, then his LinkedIn. David Morrison, partner, and not just any firm, the same one Julia worked at. I stared at the screen for a long time, feeling something cold settle over me. This wasn't a fling. This was calculated. What happened next wasn't some discovery in a text message or a camera. It was our joint insurance policy. I was looking through the paperwork to file an update after my physical, simple stuff, when I noticed the beneficiary section had changed. It didn't say my name anymore. It said David Morrison. I went completely still. You can love someone for years, build a life, share secrets and holidays and bills, and still never truly know what they're capable of. That's what made it hit so hard. Not just that she was screwing someone else, but that she'd started planning for me to not be around. The next step was unthinkable, but I did it anyway. I hacked her iPad. She kept it linked to the cloud. We both did. It didn't take much effort to dig into messages, notes, voice memos. I found them all. Plans for an upcoming mountain retreat. Details about the trail, isolated, poor cell signal, high altitude cliffs. Phrases like misstep and too much weight on the edge. They weren't subtle. One note ended with, "No one will ever suspect." She had every intention of making me vanish, quietly, with grief and insurance to cover her guilt. I downloaded everything, saved it on encrypted drives, printed backups, mailed a set to my brother's P.O. box. Then I started crafting a mask of my own. Not for escape, but for war. First, I bought a suit just like his. Same cut, same brand, same goddamn pocket square. I began appearing near their haunts. The wine bar on 5th, the boutique on 9th. Always just far enough away to be a shadow. Just a flicker in the corner of her eye. Sometimes she'd pause, sensing something, but I'd be gone by the time she turned. It wasn't revenge. Not yet. I wasn't ready for that. This was about control, reminding her in some subtle, invisible way that the walls were closing in. She just didn't know who was holding the rope. She stopped smiling after 2 weeks. Her eyes began scanning reflections in windows, checking her rearview mirror twice. looking over her shoulder at the gym entrance. She felt it, the presence, the echo. I never made contact, never sent a message, just appeared, dressed like him, watching, and she began to unravel. The calls to David grew shorter, more paranoid. I intercepted voicemails on the synced iPad, her breath shallow, whispering, "I think he knows." He'd reassure her, calmly, like a man who thinks he's smarter than everyone else. That confidence would eat him alive. By the third week, she started drinking at night again. Old habit. Her wine bottles doubled in the trash. That perfume, the one that tipped me off, still clung to her coat, and now it made my stomach turn. I kept the bottle, took it from her gym bag one night while she slept, put it in the guest bathroom next to her wedding ring, which she thought she lost during a hike 2 months back. She hadn't lost it. I took it then too. I wanted her to wonder how it got there. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about becoming the storm she thought she'd outrun. I wasn't leaving. I was transforming. And that was only the beginning. The first time I saw David Morrison in person, up close, not behind glass or across a parking lot, I was stunned by how average he really was. In photos, he looked polished, calculated, a man of power and taste. But standing 15 feet away from him inside that overpriced coffee shop downtown, he looked like a man playing a role just a little too hard. The suit was perfect, sure, but the eyes gave him away. They didn't carry wisdom, just ego. That day I wasn't there for coffee. I was there to get close enough to brush past him, to test his scent, to match it with the cologne Julia brought home 2 weeks ago under the lie of company gifts. It was the same. I left smiling before he even noticed me. By then, the shadow game had turned into an obsession. I became fluent in David's routines, where he parked, when he left the firm, what his lunch orders looked like. I even timed how long he stayed in the gym. It wasn't paranoia anymore. It was discipline. Calculated preparation. I wasn't spiraling, I was sharpening. Still, I knew watching from afar wouldn't be enough. I needed someone to peel the rest of the layers. So I hired a PI. Not the kind you find in yellow pages. The kind you meet in bars you don't tell your wife about. He looked like he hadn't slept in 3 years and probably hadn't done anything legal in 5. Perfect. Within a week, he gave me everything. David Morrison was married. His wife? No ordinary spouse. She was the daughter of Judge Theodore Blevins, the same man who oversaw family court in our jurisdiction. I read the dossier 3 times in silence, every breath tighter than the last. It wasn't just an affair anymore. It wasn't even about insurance or lust. This was a coup. They wanted it all. My wife, my business, my name, my life. Every inch of it, gone, with a smug eulogy on a mountainside trail and a quiet deposit to David's account weeks later. I took a long drive that night. No music, just the sound of rubber on asphalt and rage bubbling slow beneath my ribs. The next day, I started acting. Step 1, I intercepted David's prescriptions. It wasn't hard once I bribed his assistant at the firm's clinic. I didn't touch anything dangerous, nothing that would get me locked away if this ever went sideways. I just replaced his migraine medication with placebos, mild, deliberate inconvenience, the kind that would blur his focus during high-pressure meetings. Make him doubt his health. Make him dependent on Julia, who I knew had already begun carrying his backups in her purse like a lovesick secretary. Then came the photos. Simple, clear. My PI had dozens. Julia and David in restaurants. Julia and David outside the firm. Julia and David kissing like no one else mattered, not even the judge's daughter he came home to each night. I printed them in color, packaged them in a sleek manila envelope. No note, just photos. I sent them straight to David's wife via overnight courier. She made her move faster than I expected. 2 days later, she stormed into the firm, on a Thursday naturally, and screamed so loud in the lobby they had to escort her out. She threw the photos across the reception desk, called Julia a whore and David a coward, and demanded a divorce right then and there. I didn't have to be there to witness it. I saw it all through the PI's lens, recorded in crisp HD. David tried to save face, but the cracks had already formed. The whispers started. The staff avoided him, his authority drained by the hour, like blood from a vein. A week later, I invited him to meet. I framed it as a man-to-man talk, civil, private. We met in the conference room at my pharmacy's corporate office. I wore the suit again, the same one he favored, just to rattle him. Inside, a hidden mic recorded every breath. Hidden cameras behind frosted glass did the rest. I offered him water. He refused. "I know everything," I said quietly. "Your affair, your plans, the change in insurance, and I know who your wife's father is." His eyes darted to the door. Not fear, not yet, just calculation. Still trying to bluff the hand. "I've already sent everything to the prosecutor's office," I lied. "The files, the photos, even your little mountain adventure with my wife." That's when his skin paled, a twitch in his jaw. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. Just the slow, silent gasp of a man realizing he's been outplayed. "You want me dead. You want my wife, my business. But you forgot I know how to dig too." He didn't respond. He just sat there, defeated. I let the silence choke him. When he finally stood to leave, his legs trembled. Julia, meanwhile, received her own little surprise. A random letter from our insurance provider, asking for clarification about the beneficiary change. Standard protocol, it said. Nothing to worry about. Just a routine review. She called me that night, confused, nervous. Voice like a bird trapped in a cage it built itself. I answered coolly, told her I'd look into it. She thanked me like she still believed I was her clueless husband, the one who massaged her shoulders and left notes in her suitcase. The next morning, I sent her an anonymous email. Just a single sentence. "Do you think he'll still want you when this all burns?" She didn't show up to yoga that Thursday. The silence after that stretched wide and deep. Julia kept her phone on her at all times. David started using back entrances at the firm. Their little fantasy was starting to collapse. No sex, no murder, just tension. Uneasy conversations and glances behind every mirror. But I wasn't done, not even close, because now it wasn't about stopping them. It was about making them doubt every single step they ever took toward me. I showed up an hour late on purpose. I wanted every head in the room turned when the doors opened. Julia's firm was hosting their annual corporate celebration, lavish, loud, and infested with polished grins and fragile egos. The kind of night they all used to gloat and preen and snap pictures for magazines they subscribed to, only to see their names in print. I wore his suit again. Not a replica anymore. His. Custom-tailored, same brand, same fabric, same subtle charcoal blue shimmer under the lights. I even had the same cufflinks. I paid an insider at his tailor to get every spec. When I walked in, everything slowed. Not literally, but in my head it felt like the world held its breath. She was standing by the bar, red dress, hair pinned the way she always said made her feel powerful. And when her eyes landed on me, I watched something shatter behind them. A wine glass slipped from her hand, hit the floor, and sprayed her heels in broken crystal and shame. Her breath caught, her body froze, and then I smiled. Not a grin, not a smirk, just enough of a smile to let her know. I know. And more importantly, this is only the beginning. People turned, murmured, glanced between me and her and David, who hadn't seen me yet. I kept moving, calm, measured steps across the ballroom toward the stage. The event manager had no idea what was about to happen, but I did. I climbed onto the platform without a word. No one stopped me. No one could. I walked straight to the microphone and tapped it once. The sound silenced the room. And then I began. "I want to tell you all a story," I said, my voice measured, steady. "It's about a man who loved his wife. Deeply, blindly, completely." Some people chuckled. Others glanced nervously at Julia, who now looked like she couldn't breathe. This man gave her everything. Trust, loyalty, 12 years of marriage, vacations, dreams, 2 cats, a future. I pulled a remote from my pocket and clicked the screen behind me. The first photo appeared, Julia and David, outside that boutique, her hand on his chest, his lips grazing her temple. The crowd murmured louder now. Some gasped. David's face had gone white. Meet David Morrison, I continued, letting the photo linger before shifting to the next. Her law firm partner, her lover, her co-conspirator. Click. The next photo appeared, this one from the lodge brochure. Their planned mountain retreat, her digital reservation confirmation. The hiking trail circled in red. I zoomed in on the notes they'd scribbled. He was supposed to die here, I said flatly, watching people's jaws drop. Slipped. Pushed. No witnesses. A clean insurance payout. Click. Now came the texts. Not all of them, just enough. Words like dose, no questions, accidental fall, and beneficiary already updated. I filed a lawsuit yesterday, I said, returning my gaze to the audience. Everything's all ready with the authorities. The full recordings, the insurance changes, the travel logs. But I thought it'd be polite to give you all a little preview. I figured, if they wanted to take everything from me, I might as well return the favor. And then I turned to David, who was frozen in place. You forgot one thing, I said, locking eyes with him. I'm a lawyer too. Gasps swept the room. A few people even applauded. Small, awkward claps from those who had probably suspected something and now felt vindicated. David turned and bolted. Not walked. Bolted. Out through the nearest emergency exit like a man chased by ghosts. Julia stood there shaking, her fingers trembling against the edge of the bar. She looked like she wanted to scream, to cry, to crumble into the floor, but I just nodded at her once. Cold, controlled. Then stepped off the stage. I didn't stay long after that. The next morning I read the headlines like someone reading his own eulogy, but from the wrong body. Partner accused of murder plot. Law firm in crisis. Betrayal, affairs, and a fall that never happened. Wife fired from firm. Partner under investigation. David was arrested that afternoon, not for the plot yet, but for trying to bribe a physician 6 months ago, asking for a blend strong enough to sedate without question. The man had saved the messages. For liability, he said. Bless him. Julia was terminated from her firm within the week. Her access revoked, every account frozen. Her name stripped from the website like it had never been there. The judge, her lover's father-in-law, filed a formal recusal from the divorce case the moment the photos reached his daughter. His reputation wasn't worth saving Julia's ass. She'd become nuclear, but none of it gave me peace. Not yet. I didn't want revenge in the traditional sense. Not violence, not threats. I wanted erosion. I wanted decay. And that takes time. It takes silence. Watching from a distance while the rot spreads slowly through every piece of a person's life until all that's left is regret and self-loathing. I'd planted the seeds. Now I'd watch them grow. I didn't contact Julia, didn't respond to her desperate voicemails. She called from burner phones, emailed from alt accounts, sent letters, actual handwritten letters, begging me to talk. But there was nothing left to say. She didn't want me dead because she hated me. She wanted me dead because I made her feel small. And David? He was just the weapon she chose to swing, but the weapon misfired. And now I was sharpening one of my own. Because this wasn't the climax. This was just the curtain call. 1 year. That's how long it took to complete the masterpiece. 12 months since Julia tried to murder me with a smile and a fraudulent insurance form. Since David Morrison wore a $5,000 suit and called it charm. Since they handed me a death sentence wrapped in yoga mat lies and thought I'd go quietly into the dirt. Now it was my turn to rewrite their ending. When David was convicted, falsifying medical prescriptions, bribery, intent to defraud, the courtroom was so silent you could hear his wife's wedding ring clatter to the floor as she flung it at his feet. 6 years behind bars. Not for attempted murder, not officially, but enough to wipe his name off the doors of every courtroom and corporate boardroom in the state. Gone. Finished. The look on his face when the verdict dropped. That was worth more than any dollar amount. And Julia? Well, she fell harder. She lost everything. The firm blacklisted her. The Bar Association suspended her license, pending investigation, which we all know is just a polite way to say you're done. With the media hounding her and half her former colleagues pretending they'd never so much as shared an elevator with her, she had no choice but to disappear. She sold her Lexus, then the townhouse, then the emergency-only Rolex David bought her. Piece by piece, she watched her empire slip through her fingers, while I, her ghost, just waited patiently for the final piece to fall. And then I hired her, not by accident, not through a temp agency. I handpicked her resume off the pile when she applied under her maiden name, didn't recognize my new firm, couldn't know I was the managing partner. I made sure HR used only her first name when they introduced her. Claire, this is the man you'll be assisting directly. The second she stepped into my office, she froze. Her face went pale. Her knees visibly buckled for a moment before she straightened them. I didn't look up at first, just kept signing paperwork like she was no one, like I hadn't once loved her enough to die for her. She opened her mouth, but I cut her off with one sentence. You start Monday. And I made her earn every penny of that paycheck. She fetched coffee, scheduled meetings, made copies while the rest of the staff asked in whispers if she used to be someone. A partner? A senior associate? They didn't recognize her from the headlines. Time and disgrace have a way of changing your face. She avoided mirrors, spoke only when spoken to, never smiled. But every morning she had to watch me walk in, tailored and confident, with my new wife on my arm. Yes, her former best friend, Elena. Julia never saw it coming. Elena and I hadn't spoken in years, not seriously, but after everything came out, she reached out to apologize. We talked. Dinners became weekends. Weekends became something else. And unlike Julia, Elena had never needed power to feel like someone. She had strength already. She helped me heal. We weren't just a couple now. We were building something real. Something Julia had never been capable of. And when my children I once thought I'd lose in the chaos, called Elena Mom, Julia wept in the hallway. I saw her, behind the glass of the conference room, clutching a coffee tray, trembling like a leaf, staring at the life that could have been hers if she hadn't traded it for a man in a suit and a death certificate. But I wasn't finished, not yet. My final move was the one that would never fade. I handed our story to the press. Not as a tantrum, not for revenge porn. I packaged it cleanly. Names redacted, timelines polished, just enough juice to make it undeniable. The media pounced like wolves. The headline ran for 3 weeks straight. The lawyer who tried to kill her husband and lost everything. By the time her full name leaked, she couldn't walk into a single grocery store without getting side-eyed. Couldn't post online without being torn apart. Couldn't rebuild even if she wanted to. She tried. I watched her send out resumes, tried to work at a call center, a real estate office, a private school. One by one, they all dropped her. Eventually, she started working part-time at that same boutique, the one where David used to wait for her on Thursdays, where she once played the part of a rich man's mistress in perfume and silk. Now she wore flats and folded bags, ringing up women who reminded her of who she used to be. And I started shopping there. Not often, just enough. Sometimes I bought perfume for Elena. Sometimes I just walked in, browsed, and left with nothing. But I always made sure to lock eyes with her, always tipped generously, always said thank you. Sometimes I even thanked her, because if she hadn't betrayed me, if she hadn't tried to erase me from my own life, I never would have discovered what I was truly capable of. I didn't just survive her, I outlived her. And every single day I walked into that office, hand in hand with my wife, and saw Julia quietly lower her eyes behind the glass. Every day she called me sir, while my new family waited outside. That was justice. Not the kind with gavels and closing arguments, but the kind that sinks in slowly. The kind that hurts more with time. The kind you have to watch. And I made damn sure she watched. That's all for now, folks. Thank you for being with me today and listened. And if you liked my story, please subscribe, hit the like button, and comment below what you think about all this and what would you do if you were me. Also, don't forget to check my other stories in description below.